In today's video, we're going to be painting up an Ogre Chieftain from Reaper Bones. Okay, so this Ogre Chieftain actually comes in two pieces, and we're going to be keeping them separate just for now, just so I can get into a lot more of that detail. But because this is Reaper Bones, I always like to just give them a quick wash, just with some soapy water, to get all the mold release on them, to make them a bit easier to paint. Just makes it a lot easier in the long run. So once we have it all cleaned up, what we're going to do is we're going to move on with some skeleton bone, and we're going to be using this to paint the orc's skin tone, because orcs in Dungeons and Dragons and most fantasy role-playing games, they sort of seem to be more of a yellow skin tone, or even somewhat green, but I prefer to paint them yellow to separate them from just the green tone of an orc, because otherwise they just end up by looking like a giant orc, and I want to have something to differentiate them a little bit. So once we have all the ogre skin color applied, what we're going to be doing is we're going to move on to some gunmetal here, and what we're going to be doing is the ogre has a little bit of chainmail on it, so we're going to be using our gunmetal to do that, just under all these little plates. Now I'm going to be doing these plates a different color. You may want to do them the same color as the steel, but I want to set them out from that gunmetal color, just to give it a little bit more variety, add a bit more color into the miniature. So once all that gunmetal's dried, you can see I've also painted it here on the shield. But what we're going to do is we're going to grab some tanned flesh, and we're going to use this to paint up the main portion of the shield, because I'm going to paint it up like the ogre's killed a monster or something like that, and it's stretched its skin across the shield face. Give it a little bit more visual interest than rather just painting the whole thing silver like it's more of a design. So I thought just adding that on would just bring out a little bit more difference. So once we've got that shield painted up, what we're going to do is we can come back to our ogre, and we're going to grab that exact same tan flesh, and what we're going to be doing is we're going to be using that tan flesh to also paint on this sort of fur underclothing he has just here. And I'm just going to be painting that up the same. Maybe it's come from the same creature, or it just gives off a nice sort of varied fur color as well. So just doing that to also tie in the two pieces together as well. So once we have that all dry, what we're going to be doing is we're going to come in now with a leather brown, and we're going to be using this to paint up all the leather belt and straps that the Ogre Chieftain has on him. And he has quite a lot on him actually. So just grabbing a good sized brush, and we just want to come in here, grab all these little belts and stuff that he has on the front of him, sort of looking like a skirt or something like that, and we're just applying that over them. He also has a lot of straps up by his chest and his neck, all holding his armor together as well, so don't forget to grab those and go all the way around as well. So now we have all the leather belts all painted up and dried. What we're going to be doing is we're going to move on with some rough iron, and we're going to use this to paint up all the little like metal squares of sort of scrap metal that you can see on the ogre's chest here. And also we're going to use this to paint his armor on his shoulder and on his arm. So the reason why I'm doing this rough iron is I want to make it look like he's found some real sort of nasty old bits of metal, and he's cobbling them together to make his own armor, rather than he's a smith or knows a smith that can make him some armor, because I feel like ogres, not being gentle folk, sort of would rather find scrap iron around than have something perfectly made for them like that. So I just feel like it fits a little bit better, and also to vary up the colors that we have here on this ogre, rather than it all being silver metal. So once we have all those bits of armor all dried up and complete, what we're going to do is we're going to move on to some mummy robes. I want to be using this for a few things on the miniature. We're going to use this here to paint up the skulls that he has decorated on him. We're also going to use this to paint up the horn, just the base part of the horn, because we've gone around the metal engraving bits with our metal color. And we're also going to paint up his foot wraps he has on. It might be quite hard to see, but he actually has some foot wrappings on a set of shoes. So we're going to use our mummy robes to do all that. So once we have all those painted up and dried, what we're going to do is we're going to move on now with an oak brown, and we're going to use this to paint up the Ogre Chieftain's great club that he's wielding, and we're also as well going to use this to paint up the inside of the Ogre Chieftain's shield. So don't forget about that as well. So just being careful now with a sort of a smaller detail brush, trying to get in there. Also avoiding those little stony protrusions and stuff on there, because we're going to be painting those up a different color as well. So once all our oak brown is dry, what we're going to do is we're going to move on now with an ash grey. I'm going to be using this ash grey to paint up all the protrusions on the great club that the Ogre Chieftain is wielding, and I'm painting them up in an ash grey because I want them to give off the effect like they're sort of stones that he's carved up and placed in there, rather than it being metal spikes. I feel like they're a bit too big and chunky to be metal spikes in there. I just feel like making it bits of stone that have been broken off and he's found, a bit more like he's made the armor as well with our iron that we did just before, and also just painting up the hilt of the sword. Then with all that painted up, what we're going to do is we're going to move on with a monster brown, and we're going to use this just to paint up the last bag that the Ogre Chieftain has on him. It's just behind him here, as you can see. Just he's got a little bag on there, so we want to paint that up with the monster brown, which is nice and easy. So what we're going to do now is we're just going to move on with the warlock purple, and what we're going to do with this is we're just going to paint up the Ogre Chieftain's tongue. So this is just getting in there with a nice little brush and just being really careful, sort of just dabbing it in there to get the shape of that tongue in there. Then once we've painted in that tongue, what we're going to do is we're going to come back with our mummy robes that we used before, and we're going to be using this to just paint up the Ogre Chieftain's teeth. So just carefully going in here now with a detailed brush, and we want to just more to get it to that finer point so we can just pick out those little teeth. If it helps, catching up the side of the brush can also make it a little bit easier on you. And then once all those teeth are done, what we're going to do is we're going to come back with our mummy robes, and we're going to be using this to paint in the eyes of the Ogre Chieftain. So just carefully getting in there with a detail brush. Now, I'm not being extremely careful, but I am just trying to really get it in those sockets more than worrying so much about just getting the precise bits of the eyes, because what we're going to do is we're going to come back with the paint of his skin and paint those up. So now you can see me, like I said before, we're going to come back in with our original skin color of the orc, and we're just carefully now just painting the bits around the eyes, slowly putting it on piece by piece, really trying to get it back to the detail that's originally on the mini by just slowly taking our time and just brushing it in so it brings back all our white that we put on for our eyes into those sockets. And it's a good way to hide it up, as well as paint in eyeballs without having to fuss too much about painting them all in. So now with all that complete, I've just attached the shield back onto the miniature just by super gluing it on. And what we're going to do is going to come back with our ash grey that we used before. And what we're going to do is we're just going to paint up all the bottom part of the ground that this miniature is on. So just nice big brush strokes, just really covering up the base of this miniature. So once that base piece of the miniature is complete, what we're going to do is we're going to move on to Seraphim Sepia. And what we're going to do with this, since it's a wash, is we're going to use this to cover all of the ogre's skin tone. And because Seraphim Sepia is also quite a good skin tone by itself, it's really going to bring out all those yellows and stuff and make them just more vibrant. Because skeleton bone is quite a dull, diluted color. So adding the Seraphim Sepia on that's really going to make it look more like a living skin color. Then once all our Seraphim Sepia is dried, we've also used it on the shield as well. Just thought I'd put that in there as well. We're going to come back with some nuin oil, and we're going to use the nuin oil to cover all the metal on our miniature. So we want to cover up the armor on the shoulder, the chest, and we're also going to be going over the belts and stuff as well with this. Just because it's a nice black wash, and it's going to really bring out all the details on the clothing and stuff against our seraphim sepia that we used just before, which is a real good skin tone. So just contrasting it a lot with the black wash will really pop those details out a bit more if we were to use an agrax earthshade or something like that. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to come back in now with the agrax earthshade that I was just mentioning before, and we're going to use this to put a wash over all the wood that we've placed on the miniature. So we're talking about the great club that the ogre's wearing, and also the inside of the shield. But I'm also going to be painting the wash over the stone protrusions that the great club has on it, just to give it that more rock texture, and also like he's picked it up from the ground and stuff like that. And also don't forget, we want to use this agrax earthshade as well to paint up the base that the miniature is on. So just all that ground we painted up with our ash grey just before, we want to come back over now with the agrax earthshade to really give it that earthy sort of look. So once we have all that agrax earthshade wash done, what we're going to do is we're going to come back with our original gunmetal, and we're just going to be placing it onto the chainmail again in the dry brush fashion. So you just place it on your paper towel, get as much paint off as you can, and we're just using it to catch the top raised pieces of our chainmail. Now I'm just going to be giving highlights to the chainmail. I don't want to highlight anything else because I sort of want to keep him real dirty and grimy, because I feel like an ogre isn't really that clean. And I think the thing I'm going for here with the chainmail being highlighted is it's more so that the sun is catching it rather than it being nice clean. And once all that dry brushing is done, complete and dried, we are finished with our Ogre Chieftain from Reaper Bones, and it's come out quite nicely, as you can see. But with that, I'd like to thank you all for watching. I hope this video has been helpful for you in case you ever want to paint an ogre or this miniature as well. And I hope you will check out all my other videos, and I'll see you later.